What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and we have to talk about the winners and losers from this game because I think there's pivotal learning experiences here, not just from those who did really well or had bounce back games or even maybe surprise contributors, but even for the players that did poorly, right? Do we expect this to be a trend? What's going to be the solution? Is there an alternative whatsoever on the roster, or do we need to look at making some kind of in-season trade, maybe an elevation from the practice squad to give a different look, etc., right? Plenty of questions and answers to try to go with what we'll talk about here, but the first individual that I want to talk about in general is Tanner Engstrand. I think this was a absolutely phenomenal job by him. It felt like we looked to take advantage of weaknesses within the Steelers defense. You had your expected usage, or at least what we talked about seeing, and I think Tanner Engstrand hit on what Aaron Glenn's vision was perfectly, which was seeing a heavy dose of the run game and also seeing us being able to take advantage of things in the passing attack. Justin Fields looking phenomenal, the whole lot, but just these two numbers sum it up perfectly. A 400-plus yard game and then a 30-plus yard game all in the same day, right? I feel like you can literally count on one hand the amount of times that we've seen that happen, but even beyond just the stats, it passed the eyeball test of us being able to go down the field consistently and challenge for either a touchdown or a field goal. And so being able to keep up with Aaron Rodgers in a shootout, who nobody really questioned his ability to still go out there and dice defenses up, but it just didn't fit what the New York Jets were looking to do moving forward. So a lot to love about him, and I'm looking forward to what happens next week against the Bills, especially considering we've seen the Ravens have a pretty successful day against them, even though that also came out to a loss. But let's get into some of the players now. It has to start with Justin Fields. A turnover-free game. You always love that. It was one of the things that Aaron Glenn hyped on when he talked about players that may be losing their jobs and potentially being off of the team if he sees that being a consistent issue. The main orchestrator of the offense being able to go out there and not be the reason why we took a loss is huge. I don't dismiss anything he did on the final drive. If anything, what Justin Fields pulled off with the I think truest sense of us understanding that we definitely still need to find a way to get a number 2 wide receiver on this roster, right? I don't know if you'll see someone like a Josh Reynolds or a Tyler Johnson step up enough for that to not even be a relevant conversation. But all season long, this seems like it's going to be a pretty consistent trend for us in that we need someone else that we can go to when coverage is being shaded to Garrett Wilson or he's being double bracketed and all of these other different elements to help out Justin Fields on these reads, right? A tremendous job being able to go out there and utilize his legs. Ultimately, for me, when I looked at him, decisive, accurate, and he was a threat. And I think in the truest sense of being a dual threat quarterback, he was that, right? When he needed to step up in the pocket, he did so, but was still looking for options. When he scrambled, he was still looking to be able to try to find someone. And I think the throw to Garrett Wilson, for example, was a key factor in that. You can make an argument that Justin Fields maybe could have ran and got that first down, but seeing Garrett Wilson open, knowing what he can do with a little bit of space there, it was just untimely and a bit unfortunate that Garrett Wilson couldn't hold on to it after Jalen Ramsey essentially blindsided him. Felt like Garrett Wilson didn't really see him at all, but the connection to Garrett Wilson also being there, I don't know how Justin Fields could have had a better day outside of us walking away with the win this week. But answered a lot of questions about how he was going to be able to run this offense. And so with there not being much to really nitpick about him, perfection. Now, the next player that I want to talk about would be Armand Membou. One of the storylines this entire week was what will he do against TJ Watt? And he answered that perfectly. 0 pressures on 25 pass blocks, didn't allow any hurries, pressures, QB hits, etc. Just an absolute clean day. And I don't know what his run blocking PFF grades or anything like that looked like, but just considering what we did in the ground on the day, the offensive line as a whole also deserves kudos. But the rookie going up against a star-studded player like TJ Watt, it's a huge footnote in the beginning stages of his NFL career and his resume with the Jets. So very impressive day, very impressive outing from him, and looking forward to seeing more. The next player I want to talk about, Breece Hall, 100-plus scrimmage yard day, 100 on the ground, and then was able to add a little bit in the passing game as well. This looked like the Breece Hall that we should be expecting to see week in and week out, and it was definitely a breath of fresh air, a true relief to see how he ran, and not just the fact that there were holes available to be opened and he was making things happen, but even when there wasn't, if I had to use certain terms for him, it was explosive and crafty. I don't see the same level of speed necessarily or burst per se as we would have, let's say, even 2 years ago, but you've seen his ability to go out there and continue to make these guys miss. When there was a small crease, he was able to get skinny in the hole, shift his body, and then take off and put that foot in the ground and get things going. And even more impressive so is that you've seen those elements of the power part of his game where he was really just looking to put his shoulder down, and then he was able to force a couple guys to bounce off of him and different things like that. So his outside of the tackle running and his inside the tackle running both looked really, really good. And I feel like I've seen a lot of his best runs come off the left side of the ball. So that Simpson, Fashanu, Myers trio on the left seems like they might be gelling a little bit sooner than the right side of the offensive line, or maybe that's just the way that we wanted to target things. But excellent day by him. And then position group wise, the run defense, it was a huge question mark for us. Even after the Harrison Phillips, Jawan Briggs trades, many of us were still wondering, well, how quick will he gel, right? And how true of a partner is he going to be? We know some of the run defense numbers haven't looked great for Harrison Phillips here in the last year or two, as he's kind of had to play a little bit more over the nose and stuff like that than what he would generally be acclimated to or what really suits his skill set. But working with one of the best defensive lines that he's been able to see since being in the NFL, I think definitely helped. And just as a whole, Will McDonald, Jermaine, Quinnen, Phillips, and even the depth players, everybody contributed to holding the Steelers to 53 yards on the ground, which is huge. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be a pivotal part of that, so we'll have to wait and see what it looks like versus a Josh Allen-led defense to really feel good about us maybe turning the corner in that department. But nonetheless, the Steelers have always been known to have at least a average ground game, so it's never one that you want to overlook. They can always catch you sleeping if you feel like you just got it in the bag, but credit where credit is due. They did the job that they needed to. Unfortunately, the passing game didn't show up. And one of the last players that we'll talk about here, because it's really one of the few players that you could really highlight on defense. And I wanted to talk about this guy specifically just because he's had more pressure and more criticism laid upon him than I think anybody else on this returning defensive players for this team in Sauce Gardner. Now, I don't know what he's done over the totality of this game, but I know going into the first half, we felt really, really good about what we were seeing. Out of 15 first half cover snaps, he was targeted 0 times, which basically means he was blanketing guys and completely nullifying DK Metcalf, who he was traveling and being able to follow for the majority of the game from Aaron Rodgers, which is huge, right? And even going into the second half, I imagine things look good. The only catch that comes to my mind, since I still haven't been able to watch the full game yet, was whatever happened late in the fourth quarter that Sauce Gardner alluded to himself during his press conference, that helped set up their ability to go out there and get a field goal or whenever it actually ended up occurring. But elite day from Sauce, and I couldn't be prouder of the guy, right? He's someone that the coaching staff has already mentioned. He's so good that it's essentially him versus himself, but he seems remotivated, and if this was any indication of what we're going to expect, this could be another career lockdown year for Sauce Gardner, which is insane to think about. Now, on the flip side, we have to talk about some of the losers here, and I came up to the same conclusion that mostly everybody else did. Brandon Stephens was one of the worst problems, and I think I kind of fell into a lot of the hype over training camp, right, where he was reportedly having multiple great days against Garrett Wilson where he was getting pass breakups, turning his head around, right? I think even during the preseason there was some impressive moments there, specifically against the Packers, for example, where he was able to turn his head around, and then you seen that athleticism kick in, and he was triggering to the ball and forcing pass breakups and different things of that nature. But this is a eerily similar flashback to what a lot of Raven fans were warning us about when the contract came through, and we saw that we were signing Stephens, right? A name that nobody was really considering for the Jets. I heard every content creator under the sun scrambling to try to figure out who it was and why we were signing this guy, and it still hasn't been positive reports. Outside of what training camp happened, everybody still expected Stephens to fall flat on his face, and ultimately he ended up fitting the bill, right? 7 targets, 5 catches, 60 yards, and 2 touchdowns, which is insane. But he also got flagged for defensive pass interference, and the one that we've heard everybody talk about towards the end of the game was the defensive pass interference that went uncalled against Calvin Austin on that deep pass from Rodgers. And this is going to be something that we need to be in tune with, right? This could be something that ends up costing his job sooner than later if he doesn't figure this out, because in 2024, he also was flagged for 5 defensive pass interferences, along with the bevy of targets, right? I think I keep seeing somewhere that he's essentially led the league in targets or been at the top in the last 2 years, which says that every team immediately flags him as part of their game plan for how they're going to get their passing game going. So we'll see how we get around that. I think Aaron Glenn's going to have a short leash with them, but there is going to be some leash, right? It might take another 2 or 3 games of having a performance like this, but what we saw over the offseason doesn't seem like it's necessarily matched 100% with what we saw in this week 1 game. I think the part that disappoints me the most is look at who he was really going up against. It was Calvin Austin III. Not only is there a physical matchup advantage for Stephens, but just looking at what the rest of the secondary should have been able to do to help him out in some of the miscommunication cues that I've seen Connor Rodgers pull out, for example. He should have been able to make at least 2 or more 3 plays on this ball on Calvin Austin during this game, which could have completely changed things. There were 2 passes specifically where Calvin Austin jumped out of his body in order to catch that and completely mossed Brandon Stephens and just led him essentially running into Calvin Austin, which is how he got down, or he ended up getting shaped. So it's stuff like that I don't want to see, because not only are you talking about players that aren't household names or even known to be victimizing defenders, because you're only talking about them being in their 2nd or 3rd years and or not even having strong roles previously, but that means essentially anybody that another team walks out there as their 2nd, 3rd, 4th best weapon, we can't feel good about Brandon Stephens being able to line up against him in man coverage. So you don't want to have to switch too many things if you're Aaron Glenn with having to have him play more off man coverage or different things like that to keep the plays in front of him. But there's going to have to be an answer. And I think the easiest thing that you look to on this roster is the fact that Azareye'h Thomas had an excellent offseason as well, and he could be the immediate replacement for him as a guy that hasn't struggled with any of the same issues that Brandon Stephens has had so far. And then lastly, and the guy that many people are going to point the finger to as being one of the primary reasons that we lost this game, Xavier Gibson, right? Minimal impact in the passing game. Actually, I don't think he's had a single catch, but he had the return fumble. AG called it out. The announcers called it out. All of the fans on both sides going crazy. It was a 14-point swing. Not only did it rob us of a possession, but it ended up also allowing Aaron Rodgers to have short field advantage and go out there and put up another 7 to keep things close. So for the rest of us that had that head-scratching decision about why Jamal Pritchett ended up being cut as opposed to Xavier Gibson, if anybody is capable of being cut in the coming days or demoted somehow and returned to practice squad or something like that, it's going to be Gipson here. And I know AG tried to smooth it over with the stat that Gipson had like 147 catches or something without a fumble over the course of the offseason. But nobody's going to care about that if the moment the lights turn bright and this happens to you. And I think it was Bart Scott that called out something huge, right? It was the simple fact that whatever side of the field that you're running to as a returner, you should be having, if you're running to the left, the ball should be on the left side because you don't want the guys on the right side punching the ball out, much like we've seen in different things of that nature. So it's the minute details that are really shooting us in the foot. Again, AG really called out a lot of this kind of stuff, but based on the way I've seen Aaron Glenn handle his press conference, it feels like he's going to look for alternatives or he's going to find answers depending on the severity of these issues and the no-nonsense nature of some of these problems that are going to happen, such as the penalties, such as the turnover. So I'm looking forward to how we address these, how that accountability continues to be handled. But considering we have Jamal Pritchett waiting in the wings, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he at least gets a call up next week as a backup option. But we also saw Arian Smith and Kenny Anangwu come out there as options as well. So let me know what you guys think. Do you have any other winners or losers? I'm looking forward to the All 22 should be dropping by tomorrow for me so I can actually dive in. Probably at some point during workout, just be looking at the replay of the live game. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.